The big girl came to pay her father's debt, but the lonely CEO said, "You owe me nothing but dinner together." The lobby of Everhart Group was all marble and glass, sleek, silent, and cold enough to make Grace Holloway feel like she didn't belong. Her soft footsteps echoed too loudly as she stepped inside, clutching her worn leather purse to her chest. The pale blue dress she wore, the same one from community college, clung gently to her rounded hips and full arms, smoothing over curves she had spent years trying to hide. Her golden hair, thick and wavy, was tied in a low bun, though a few strands had escaped to frame her flushed cheeks. "Can I help you, ma'am?" the receptionist asked crisply. Grace swallowed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have an appointment with Mr. Lucas Everhart." The woman raised an eyebrow but typed something, then gave a nod. "Top floor, elevators on the left." Grace murmured a soft thanks and stepped in. 38 floors later, the doors opened into silence. No assistants, no phones. Just a glass-walled office at the end of the hallway and the silhouette of a man standing with his back to the city skyline. Lucas Everhart turned slowly when she knocked on the doorframe. He was tall, sharp in a charcoal suit, and carried the kind of presence that made the air feel thinner. His face was handsome but hard, dark eyes unreadable, his mouth set in a line that rarely smiled. "Miss Holloway," he said. "No handshake." "Mr. Everhart," she replied, straightening. "Thank you for seeing me." He nodded toward the chair across from his desk. "Sit." She did, smoothing her skirt nervously as she lowered herself. "You said this was about your father," he said, folding his hands. Grace nodded. "Henry Holloway. He borrowed money from you, $48,000, after his accident." Lucas gave no sign of surprise, just the faintest flicker of recognition in his eyes. "He's had a stroke," she continued. "He's been in and out of the hospital. He can't work. He can't repay you. But I want to." Lucas leaned back. "You want to repay $48,000? "Not all at once," she said quickly. "I don't have much, but I'll do anything. Work weekends, file papers, clean, whatever's legal. Just let me take the debt. I can't let him carry it anymore." He studied her. The way she kept her hands tightly folded, how her anxious eyes didn't look away. Her body was soft, her shape one the world had ridiculed, but there was quiet strength beneath it. "You do anything," he said, not asking, just observing. Grace hesitated. "Anything honest." Silence stretched. Then Lucas rose and walked to the window. His voice, when it came, was lower. "You don't owe me anything, Miss Holloway," he said, turning back. She blinked. I don't?" "The debt is your father's," he said, resuming his seat. "But if you insist on repaying something that was never yours, then I have a different offer." Grace's throat tightened. "What kind of offer?" He leaned forward. "Have dinner with me, once a week, for 3 months." She stared. "What?" "No strings, just dinner. No work, no contract." Grace frowned. "Why?" Lucas shrugged, but his voice was softer now. "Because I'm tired of eating alone, and because you came here not to beg, but to carry something heavy that no one asked you to. That kind of person is rare." Grace didn't speak. Couldn't. It was absurd, simple, strange, and yet it settled into her chest like a question she wasn't sure how to answer. Dinner? That was it? Or was it something else entirely? She tightened her grip on her purse strap and looked at him hard. Lucas said nothing. He simply waited. And after a long pause, still unsure what she was walking into, Grace nodded once. "All right," she said softly. Dinner. Grace Holloway had always dreamed in fabric. As a teenager, her sketchbooks brimmed with soft lines and curvy silhouettes, dresses made not for runways, but for women like her. "I want to make clothes that feel like home," she once told her father. Eyes bright, fingers smudged with pencil. She enrolled in a community college design program with trembling hope, saving every dollar from her part-time job at a grocery store. For a little while, it felt possible. Until prom night. Her boyfriend then, Jason, all charm and camera smiles, had promised something special. Instead, in the middle of a crowded Italian restaurant, he looked her up and down and said, loud enough for every nearby table, "You should have known better, Grace. You're too fat to be seen with me." Laughter, flashbulbs. A blurry photo posted online with the caption, "Brave or blind." The comments were brutal. She dropped out of the program 2 weeks later. She packed away her fabric swatches, her thread spools, and a half-finished cream-colored dress she'd sewn for herself, folded it all into a box labeled, "Maybe someday." Since then, life had become smaller, simpler, safer. She worked as a cashier at the local supermarket, kept her head down, moved gently, spoke softly. At home, she cared for her ailing father, cooking soup when he coughed, rubbing his hands when the joints ached. She didn't complain. She didn't expect much. And on rare nights, when the world was quiet and her heart ached a little more than usual, she opened the box. By the soft glow of her bedside lamp, she would slip into the cream dress. It was vintage-inspired, fitted neatly at the waist, with cap sleeves and a skirt that fluttered around her knees. Her hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric down her sides. She didn't look like the women in magazines. She didn't even look like the confident designer she once hoped to become. But for a moment, she looked like someone who belonged. Then she remembered the laughter, the hashtags, the way people never really saw her. She sighed, stepped out of the dress, and folded it back into the box. "No matter how pretty it is," she whispered, "I'm still the girl no one wants to see." Lucas Everhart, 34, hadn't been called warm in years. He was the kind of man whose rise made headlines. Youngest VP at 27, CEO before 30. He was polished, sharp, always 2 steps ahead. His voice was measured, his smile rare. People respected him. No one truly knew him. But once, he had been someone softer. Lillian had known that man, before the boardrooms, before the walls. She'd met him when he still played guitar and read her poetry in bed. She'd been an English teacher, curious, gentle, unafraid of quiet. Cancer came like a thief, swift, ruthless. By the time it had a name, there was nothing left to save. Lucas tried. The best doctors, the best care. Moments at the coast when she could still breathe deep. But love hadn't been enough. When Lillian died, nothing shattered. Something simply stopped. He stopped going home before dark, stopped checking mail that wasn't urgent, stopped setting 2 plates at dinner. "Every evening felt like I was staring at a ghost," he once said. "I couldn't look at the empty chair anymore." For 5 years, he lived like that. Quiet, controlled, alone. Each year, on Lillian's birthday, he sent a bouquet of irises to the school where she taught, the same flower he'd placed on her casket. No note, no signature. Still, the secretary always called, "Still thinking of her?" And he always replied, "Every single day." But even that ritual had begun to feel hollow. He wasn't angry anymore, or heartbroken, just fading, quietly, slowly, until the day a young woman in a worn blue dress walked into his office, nervous, determined, clutching an envelope like it might fall apart in her hands. For the first time in 5 years, Lucas didn't feel invisible. She looked at him, not like a CEO, not like a problem to solve, but like a person, like someone who knew what it meant to live beside silence, to sit across from loss, and still reach out anyway. The first dinner was quiet, not awkward, just cautious, like 2 people sitting at either end of a bridge they weren't ready to cross. Grace wore a navy blue dress, soft and simple, with sleeves that hid her arms and a cardigan she kept tugging closed. Her blonde hair was pulled into a low ponytail, as if trying to make herself smaller. Lucas had chosen a private room in an old Italian restaurant he used to visit with Lillian. The staff remembered him. They greeted him with polite nods and said nothing about the unfamiliar woman beside him. Grace sat carefully, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you for not turning me away," she said. Lucas didn't look up. "This isn't charity." "I know," she replied, steady despite the knot in her stomach. I just didn't expect to be here. Like this. Neither did he, but he didn't say that aloud. The waiter arrived. Lucas ordered with practiced ease. Grace hesitated, then quietly slid a small glass container across the table. I made this, she said. Chicken soup. My dad has trouble sleeping after his strokes, and this always calms him. I thought. Maybe your mom might like it. Lucas blinked. He reached for the container, reading the label. No garlic, low salt. She had noted his mother's dietary needs, without being told. Thank you, he said, voice softer than before. She might. Grace smiled, then reached for her fork. Her hands trembled slightly. She clearly didn't know which utensil to use and fumbled with the salad knife before glancing up, unsure. Lucas noticed, but didn't comment. When the main course arrived, he quietly switched out her silverware for the simpler set at the next place setting. Grace froze. Not embarrassed, but moved. No one had ever done something so gently thoughtful for her. Thank you, she murmured. He nodded, and they ate in near silence for a while, broken only by the soft clinks of cutlery. Grace picked out the vegetables first, setting them aside before touching the chicken. Lucas found himself watching. Lillian used to do the same, said the colors made the plate feel like a painting, and paintings should be admired first. Setting down his fork, Lucas asked, "How's your father?" Grace blinked at the question. Some days are better than others. He forgets the year sometimes, but he remembers me. That's enough. Lucas nodded. My mother calls me by my father's name, thinks I'm still 10. I'm sorry, Grace said gently. That must be hard. He looked at her fully then, for the first time. And in that moment, it wasn't about a favor or an arrangement. It was just two people, sitting across from shared hurt. Do you do this with everyone? Grace asked. The dinners? Lucas shook his head. No, just you. She smiled shyly behind her water glass. You don't even know me. I don't need to, he replied. You sat across from me honestly. That's more than most people do. By the end of the meal, Grace had flushed cheeks from the wine. She leaned back and told him a story about her father teaching her to fish when she was 7, how she'd accidentally hooked her own sweater. Lucas laughed, low, real, and surprised by the sound. When they stood to leave, he held her coat open. It wasn't a date. There were no promises, no flirtation. Just a quiet gesture, and the shared breath of something not yet spoken. But as Grace stepped out into the cool night, a warmth bloomed in her chest. Someone had seen her, not the polished version, not the brave face, just her, and he hadn't looked away. The first time Lucas saw the sketchbook was by accident. He had stopped by Grace's apartment to drop off a container of soup from a new deli downtown, a strange reversal of their usual roles. She wasn't expecting him, and when she fumbled with the lock and let him in, he stepped into the warmth of her small but tidy living room. It smelled faintly of lavender and lemon soap. She offered him tea. He declined, and while she went to the kitchen to check something on the stove, Lucas's eyes fell on a cardboard box tucked beneath the coffee table. It had no lid. Inside, he saw color. Paper edges poked out, curled from use. There were fashion sketches, dozens of them, drawn in pencil and colored with gentle pastels, flowing dresses with high waists and soft necklines. Designs clearly made for women with curves, with confidence, not fantasies of beauty, but declarations of it. And all of them signed with a looping G.H. When Grace returned, she paused in the doorway. You weren't supposed to see those. Lucas looked up. Why not? She hesitated, then shrugged. They're just leftovers, from a version of me that used to dream too much. Your work is good, he said, genuinely. It's thoughtful and bold. Grace sat on the armrest of the couch, fingers picking at the hem of her sleeve. They laughed, you know, back in college. Said no one would ever buy clothes from someone who looked like me. Said I was better off drawing cartoon bears than dresses. Lucas didn't respond right away, but later that night, after he got home, he stayed up until nearly 2 a.m., searching for the perfect gift. 2 days later, a package arrived at Grace's door. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook with thick ivory paper, and tucked between its pages, a note written in clean, elegant handwriting. Because the world needs more beauty that looks like all of us. L.E. Grace stared at it for a long time. Then, carefully, she picked up her pencil. A week after that, Lucas invited Grace to accompany him on a visit to the care facility where his mother now lived. It was an unusually warm afternoon, and they brought a small bouquet of hydrangeas and her favorite lemon cookies. Lucas hadn't told his mother about Grace. He hadn't needed to. The moment they entered the sunlit room, his mother turned, her cloudy eyes focusing for the briefest moment on the young woman standing beside her son. "Oh," she breathed, voice soft and trembling. "You brought her back." Lucas frowned, confused. "Mom?" She smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "The girl with the golden hair. You loved her, didn't you? The one who used to make you smile." Grace said nothing. She didn't correct her. Instead, she stepped forward and gently took the older woman's hand. "I'm happy to meet you, Mrs. Everhart." The older woman blinked at the touch, then tilted her head. "Do you know any songs?" Grace smiled, a little shy. "I know a few lullabies." And so she sat on the edge of the bed, still holding her hand, and began to sing in a soft, breathy tone. Something old. Something gentle. Something her father used to hum when the power went out and they lit candles in the living room. Lucas watched, breath caught in his throat. He had never seen his mother so still, so calm. When the lullaby ended, his mother whispered, "You're the first person who's sung to me in years." Lucas swallowed hard. Later, on the drive home, the car was quiet. Grace stared out the window. Lucas kept his hands steady on the wheel, but something in him had shifted. Not because his mother had confused Grace for someone else, but because for the first time in a long time, he wished it hadn't been confusion. He wished it had been truth. The headline came without warning. On a Tuesday morning, it spread across gossip blogs and social media like wildfire. Plus-size sweetheart or PR pawn. CEO's curvy companion sparks scandal. Below it was a grainy, poorly lit photo. Grace, in her pale blue dress, standing beside Lucas at a charity auction. He was looking at her, not casually, not politely, softly, like she was the only person in the room. The article didn't hold back. It called her a nanny-type romance, accused Lucas of launching a real-life rebranding campaign, and implied their relationship was a distraction from Everhart Group's quarterly downturn. The comments were worse. She must be doing something special behind closed doors. Gold digger of the year. He could do way better. Come on. Grace stared at the screen. Her hands went cold. Her stomach sank. But what hurt most wasn't what strangers said. It was how familiar the words felt. How close they were to the things she used to tell herself in the mirror. She stopped answering Lucas's calls. She deactivated her fashion sketch account. Requested a leave from the boutique. By Friday, she was back at the grocery store, her old job, wearing the oversized vest under the hum of fluorescent lights, scanning cereal boxes with a fake smile and numb fingers. It felt safer, simpler, invisible. Because maybe she didn't belong in Lucas's world. Maybe she never had. Lucas, meanwhile, was furious. The moment the article dropped, he canceled every meeting. By mid-morning, his office was full of legal teams, PR managers, and digital strategy experts. "This is slander," he said, voice tight and low. "Take it down. I don't care what it costs. I'll write the response myself." That evening, a statement appeared across Everhart Group's platforms. "To anyone who equates a woman's worth with her waistline, you are not part of the future we are building. Grace Holloway is kind, brilliant, and deeply creative. If that challenges your idea of what love looks like, perhaps it's not her image that needs to change, but yours." It went viral. Applause rolled in. Think pieces were written. But when the screens dimmed and the office emptied, Lucas sat alone in his high-rise apartment, staring out into the rain. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a coward. Had he brought Grace into his world to protect her, or to keep from being alone? It was a gray, misting Sunday when he saw her again. She had just finished her shift. Her hair was tucked under a plastic hood, her shoulders drawn in with quiet exhaustion. Lucas had been waiting in the parking lot for 2 hours. No umbrella. Just a slim, paper-wrapped box under one arm. When she turned the corner and saw him, soaked through in his tailored suit, she stopped. "Lucas," she said, barely audible. He stepped forward. "I'm not here to explain," he said gently, "only to say I'm sorry." She didn't speak. "You don't owe me anything. Not your time. Not dinner. Not forgiveness." He held out the package. Grace took it slowly. Inside was a silver fountain pen, elegant, classic, etched with her initials, G.H. Her eyes filled. "You told me once," he said, voice quiet, "about the pen you always dreamed of as a girl, when you still believed you'd design dresses." I remembered. She stared at him. "If this started because of a debt, how do I know what we had was real?" Lucas nodded, steady. "Your father's debt was cleared the day you walked into my office. I never intended to collect, but I didn't tell you, because I didn't know how else to keep seeing you without giving you a reason to leave." The rain continued, soft and steady. Grace held the pen to her chest, as if grounding herself. She didn't move, didn't speak, just breathed. Then, she turned to go. But halfway to the doors, she paused and looked back, and smiled. It wasn't bold, not certain, but it was there. Lucas smiled too. Not because she had forgiven him, not because he knew what would happen next, but because, for the first time in years, he had loved someone completely. And maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to believe she could love him back. The call came on a crisp Wednesday morning. Grace had just left the sewing studio she rented when her phone buzzed. "Grace Holloway," said a woman, voice smooth, too cheerful to trust. "I'm with Inside and Out, the reality show. We help women reinvent themselves, inside and out. America loves you. You're the big girl who won a billionaire's heart. Let us help you look the part, make you worthy of him." Grace froze. "Worthy," she echoed softly. The woman chuckled. "You know how people talk. This is your chance to silence them." Grace thanked her and hung up. Her hands were trembling. That word, worthy, echoed again and again. She paused outside a cafe, catching her reflection in the glass. Soft curves, a dress she'd worn 100 times. She had thought she had learned to love herself. But now, a quiet doubt crept in. Was Lucas proud of her, or had she just become part of his redemption arc, the kind, curvy woman who made the cold CEO seem human? Did he love her, or the way she made him look? That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat brushing her hair, fingertips lingering at the curve of her shoulder. She whispered to the mirror, "If I change, will he love me more or less?" Across town, Lucas sat with his mother at the care facility. Her mind had been clearer lately. She hummed softly, then looked at him and said, "You look tired and guilty." He managed a faint smile. "You always could tell. Is it the girl?" "Grace," he said quietly. She nodded. "She's good for you. You used to smile like that when your father was still here. What's stopping you?" Lucas exhaled. "I'm afraid. She came into my life because of a debt. I cleared it, but I never told her. If she finds out, she might leave." His mother squeezed his hand. "If you keep truth from someone out of fear, you've already lost them. Tell her, or lose her for good." The next afternoon, Grace visited her father. While folding his laundry, she found a letter tucked in a drawer, dated months earlier. It was from Everhart Group. Her eyes skimmed the words. "Dear Mr. Holloway, in light of your current health condition, the remaining debt has been cleared in full. Please take care." Grace stared at the letter, heart pounding. The debt had been forgiven before she ever walked into Lucas's office. Their dinners, the arrangement, None of it had been about repayment. He hadn't used her. He had wanted to see her, and he hadn't known how to ask. She barely slept that night. The next morning, she caught the earliest bus and walked straight into Everhart Group, the letter clutched in her hand. Lucas was in a meeting, but when he saw her, he dismissed everyone without a word. She stepped into his office, voice shaking. "You cleared my father's debt before I ever agreed to those dinners." He met her gaze. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" He hesitated. "Because I knew you wouldn't come back, and I wasn't ready to lose you." Her voice cracked. "You tricked me into staying." "I didn't trick you," he said. "I was trying to find a way to show you that you weren't some obligation. You were the reason I started living again." Tears welled in her eyes. "You should have trusted me." "I know," he whispered. "I'm trusting you now." She looked down at the letter. The ink was smudged from her grip. "Then let me decide what to do with the truth." Lucas nodded. "Take all the time you need." She turned toward the door, her chest heavy with anger, relief, and something she couldn't quite name. She didn't know if forgiveness was possible, but as the elevator doors slid closed behind her, she realized something else. She didn't want to stop loving him either. The road to the summer house was lined with tall pines, golden leaves pooling like quiet witnesses. Grace didn't ask where they were going when Lucas picked her up that morning. He had only said, "There's something I want you to see," and she had nodded, the letter from Everhart still tucked inside her coat. When they pulled into the gravel drive, she recognized the house from a photo on his bookshelf. White shutters, an old porch swing unmoved by years. "I haven't been back since Lillian," Lucas said as they stepped out. "But it doesn't feel like hers anymore. It feels ready." Grace followed him inside. The air smelled like cedar and dust. They moved through the rooms, opening windows, brushing off cobwebs. In the backyard, Lucas began clearing overgrown weeds. Grace joined, hands brushing his once, then again. The work left dirt on their fingers, peace in their silence. By late afternoon, the yard had taken shape. Lucas stood, stretching, then nodded toward the kitchen. "Come with me." Inside, he opened a drawer and pulled out a photo, slightly grainy, faded at the edges. Their first dinner. Grace in her worn blue dress, Lucas mid-laugh. She wasn't posing, just smiling. "I printed this the next day," he said. "Something about it. It felt like the start of something real." Grace ran her thumb along the edge. "I thought that night was absurd. I didn't know it would change everything." Lucas opened a tall cupboard and pulled something out. A chair, handmade, sturdy wood, curved back, smooth arms, carved across the top slat, GM. Grace blinked. "You made this?" "I'm not good with flowers or speeches," he said. "And a ring doesn't feel right, not yet. But you once told me you gave up designing because there was never space for someone like you." He stepped closer. "I want you to know, there is space, in your work, at my table, in my life." Grace sat slowly, her hand brushing the initials. "It's beautiful." Lucas knelt beside her, not dramatic, just present. "If you say yes, this chair will always be yours. At every meal, every season, next to me. No." Her eyes searched his, hopeful, scared, moved. "This isn't a proposal," he added. "Not yet. It's a promise that if you want to build something, slowly, honestly, I'm here." The room fell quiet. Wind stirred the trees. The faint scent of cinnamon drifted from the old pantry. Grace leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. "No one's ever made space for me before," she whispered. Lucas closed his eyes. "Then let this be the first of many things we build." She didn't answer with words. But she stayed. She pulled the chair to the corner window, opened her sketch pad, and began to draw. Lucas, outside, sitting under golden trees, looking back at her like she was the beginning of everything he thought he'd lost forever. Spring had returned to New Hampshire like a whispered promise. Sunlight stretched across the quiet main street, dappling sidewalks and glass windows. At the end of the block stood a small boutique, its wooden sign etched with gentle lettering. Shape and Story. Your shape, your story. Inside, Grace Monroe Everhart knelt beside a glowing bride-to-be, adjusting the hem of a plus-size wedding gown. Her golden hair, now longer and softly curled, framed her face as she moved with ease, confident, steady, and deeply self-assured. She wasn't the girl in the worn blue dress anymore. She was a woman who had learned, through heartbreak and healing, that love doesn't ask you to shrink. "Perfect," she murmured, smoothing the fabric. The bride smiled, beaming. In the quiet workspace behind the boutique, sunlight poured through wide windows, warming bolts of fabric, half-finished sketches, and a table strewn with thread. On the wall hung a single framed photo, Grace and Lucas at their first dinner, captured in a moment once filled with uncertainty. Next to it sat a hand-carved wooden chair, worn in just enough to feel like home. The initials on the back, G.M.E. Grace sat in the chair, sketchpad resting on her lap, pencil in hand. Her lines flowed easily, shaping a new summer collection. Clothes for women who lived outside the mold, who had stories stitched into every curve. The bell above the boutique door chimed softly. Lucas appeared in the doorway, dressed in a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. In his hands, 2 chamomile teas. He placed one beside her, then took the seat across from her, the same way he had that first night. Grace glanced up at him and smiled. Quiet, steady. Lucas chuckled. "I ran into an older woman outside the flower shop today. She asked why my wife always looks so happy." Grace lifted a brow, smiling. "And what did you say?" He leaned back, eyes soft. "I said it's because every day you wake up and choose yourself, not out of debt, not for anyone else, just for you." Grace's gaze dropped for a moment. Then she nodded. "It's the first time in my life I've felt that." Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key on a chain. He handed it to her. "I remember you liked how the morning light hit the east windows at the summer house," he said, "so I had them redone. Added a rack for your sketchbooks. Thought it might be a good place to work." Grace turned the key over in her hand, her eyes shining, not with tears, but with something quieter, grateful, grounded. "I thought you were going to use it as your own studio," she said softly. Lucas smiled. "Anywhere you are is a studio. And a home." Grace stood and stepped toward him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She wrapped her arms around him, not as a dramatic gesture, but as a quiet truth, the kind of embrace that said, "I see you. I choose this. I choose us." There were no fireworks, no music swelling, just the rustle of wind outside, and 2 people who had walked through fear, through doubt, and into something real. Love doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it begins with a quiet dinner, a wooden chair, a pen, a moment of kindness, and the courage to believe you don't have to change yourself to be worthy of love. You just have to believe, truly, deeply, that you already are. Thank you for listening to You Owe Me Nothing But Dinner, a story of quiet strength, second chances, and love that asks nothing but honesty. If it moved you, made you smile, or reminded you that you're enough just as you are, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt journeys. And if you felt something today, hit that hype button to show your support. It means the world and helps us keep sharing stories that truly matter. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in your own story.